Sir, this section is not for people like you. Step back, now. The words cracked through the cabin like a slap. Not whispered, not subtle. Captain Tracy Coleman stood rigid near the first-class divider, arm outstretched like she was directing traffic, not talking to a human being. She didn't blink, didn't flinch, just flicked her fingers toward the rear cabin like she was brushing lint off a uniform. "Try the rear, sir, or wait until maintenance finishes boarding." A few passengers turned their heads. Some froze mid-swipe on their phones. One man, white, mid-50s, wearing a watch that screamed executive bonus, sighed and leaned into the aisle from seat 1C. "Let's not hold up departure," he muttered. "Some of us have meetings that matter." Nathaniel Bishop stood there in silence, jacket zipped halfway, hands calm at his sides. He glanced at the seat behind the man's briefcase, 2A, his assigned seat, and said nothing. "Show credentials," Tracy snapped, "or step aside." A younger flight attendant hovered behind her, holding a tablet, unsure whether to intervene or vanish. "Tell us where you're watching from, because what you're seeing right now isn't just a seating dispute. It's what happens when someone who's underestimated lets you walk into your own downfall." Nathaniel reached into his coat and calmly pulled out a folded boarding stub. He offered it, but Tracy didn't even reach for it. "That's not a valid first-class credential. This flight's reserved for authorized personnel." "And I am authorized," Nathaniel replied evenly. "No, sir," she said, now louder for the cabin to hear. "You're not." Someone in 3D murmured, "What the hell is going on?" Captain Coleman turned toward the rear of the cabin. "Security, we've got a seat violation in 2A, passenger refusing to comply." Still, Nathaniel didn't raise his voice. Instead, he turned slightly toward the window, tapped the edge of his smart ring twice, quick and clean. Signal transmitted. Back at Stratus Logic HQ in Arlington, Virginia, Ava Kinley's screen lit up. "Clause 11.4 initiated. Ethics suppression suspected. Do you confirm, Mr. Bishop?" Nathaniel didn't respond aloud. He didn't need to. The ring had already relayed his answer. Just 90 seconds had passed since Tracy Coleman's first words. The cabin, once buzzing with polite chatter, had grown still, uncomfortably still. Nathaniel remained standing, looking directly at her. "May I sit while this is sorted?" "You may wait in the rear, not here. My seat is 2A, and your name's not on the first-class manifest." "Then maybe your manifest is wrong." "Security is on its way." A few seats back, a man with glasses slowly angled his phone toward the aisle. He was recording. So was someone else. A quiet teenager across the aisle whispered to his mom. "He hasn't done anything. They're just..." "Shh." Daniel J., seated in 3C, knew a story when he saw one. He wasn't just a passenger. He was a defense tech blogger with 500,000 followers. And he recognized Nathaniel Bishop the second he stepped on board. But Nathaniel had entered like a technician, not a CEO. No security detail, no badge, no fuss. It was intentional. Back in the aisle, Captain Coleman motioned for the technician with the tablet. "Flag this seat unauthorized. Reset manifest." "But ma'am, Now." The tech hesitated, tapped, and within seconds, seat 2A was marked vacant. The cabin screen above row 1 flickered to reflect the change. Nathaniel watched the screen, then looked down at the man in 1C, whose briefcase now covered half his seat. "You'll want to move that," Nathaniel said quietly. "Excuse me?" "I said, move your bag. That's my seat." The man chuckled. "I doubt it." Nathaniel didn't argue. He simply moved the bag aside, placed it gently on the floor, and sat down. Gasps rippled. Captain Coleman's face flushed. "You are not cleared to be here. I'm escalating this." "You already did," Nathaniel said. "And you're still escalating in the wrong direction." Stratus HQ. Real-time feed. Active. Ava Kinley leaned forward. Blue Seal Ethics Protocol fully engaged. Data stream incoming. Voice, footage, seat logs, manifest overwrite logs. AI flags match prior complaints tied to Tracy Coleman. Multiple. She picked up her line to FAA compliance office. We're registering breach of ethics under live flight conditions. Termination clause in contract is now pending. On board, Nathaniel remained silent. He didn't need to speak. Not yet. He'd given them 5 minutes to do the right thing. They were already out of time. The younger flight attendant nervously approached again. Sir, you were just logged as unauthorized. I need to ask you to deplane. You're about to learn how authorization actually works, he replied. And what happens when it's abused? Captain Coleman turned toward the front of the cabin. First Officer Spencer, initiate seat removal protocol. Let's keep this aircraft on schedule. Moments later, Spencer stormed down the aisle, puffed up with authority. Sir, step out of the seat, now, or I'll call security. You already did. You don't understand. No, Nathaniel cut in calmly. You don't. Then, as casually as checking a message, Nathaniel tapped his ring a third time. Protocol escalation authorized. FAA contract pending suspension. In real time, FAA systems received the notice from Stratus Logic Systems. Effective immediately, all technical validation services provided by Stratus Logic to FAA and affiliated charter carriers are suspended pending ethics compliance review. A soft alert beeped on the cabin's front screen. Breaking. FAA contract suspended mid-flight over ethics violation. Developing. Daniel J's live tweet had just crossed 87K views. Back in seat 3C, he whispered, He's not just a CEO. He's the one who built the system, and now he's testing it. Captain, you need to see this. First Officer Mark Spencer leaned out of the cockpit, holding a tablet that was no longer just showing flight maps and crew assignments. On the screen, blinking in sharp white text over a dark blue interface, was a message. Notice. Contract suspension executed Stratus Logic. Systems has terminated FAA validation services for this flight, and its operator effective immediately. Awaiting ethics remediation confirmation. Captain Tracy Coleman stared at it like she didn't understand English. This can't be real. Mark looked shaken. He was always cocky in the cockpit, always the guy who joked too loud and walked like turbulence couldn't touch him. But now his voice lowered. He filed it. From the cabin. From his seat. Filed what? Tracy hissed. The ethics clause. It's real, and it's been sent to FAA command. For a moment, the two of them stood there, staring at the glowing screen like it might blink and take it all back. It didn't. Back in seat 2A, Nathaniel Bishop remained calm, still in the same posture, still watching, still silent. But things around him were no longer quiet. Passengers were whispering now, clearly, not pretending anymore. Did you see the alert? That was FAA. Wait, he's Stratus? Like, Stratus? One woman near the back pulled up a website and gasped. Oh my God, he is. He owns the company that certifies these flights. The businessman from seat 1C, the one who'd moved his briefcase back over Nathaniel's spot just 10 minutes earlier, was now shrinking into himself. He was scrolling his phone, fast, panicked. He had Googled Nathaniel Bishop, and he wasn't liking what he found. Meanwhile, back at Stratus HQ, Ava Kinley didn't blink as another message hit her screen. FAA acknowledgement received. Deputy Director has requested live access to Blue Seal data stream. She activated the link. 2 clicks later, every camera on board the aircraft, from the boarding gate to the cabin to the cockpit, was now under federal ethics monitoring. The charter operator's legal office had already been CC'd, so had the Department of Transportation. Ava spoke softly into her mic. Mr. Bishop, full external visibility is live. FAA is monitoring the feed. You're clear to proceed. Captain Coleman walked back toward Nathaniel, posture stiff. She stopped 2 feet from his seat, the same seat she'd tried to take from him a few minutes earlier. Sir, she said, voice tight, we are resolving this with the FAA, but you should know creating false disruptions is grounds for being permanently blacklisted from government-certified flights. Nathaniel slowly raised his head. What you call a disruption, he said, is actually accountability. You've profiled a passenger based on appearance. You denied my identity without confirmation. And then you erased my name from a manifest your own crew didn't check. Sir, and now, he added, the entire oversight system is watching, including your superiors. Captain Coleman went pale, just slightly, enough that even the passengers noticed. A young man in 2D leaned forward. Excuse me, but are you the one behind Blue Seal? Nathaniel turned and nodded. Yes. And this is what it's for? This, Nathaniel said softly, is exactly what it's for. Daniel J., still recording from 3C, posted a new update. Breaking. Man profiled on federal charter flight turns out to be the CEO of the system that certifies it. FAA contract suspended in real time. Blue Seal protocol initiated. Hatch Airline Ethics, Nathaniel Bishop. Within 5 minutes, the post passed 300,000 views. Up in the front galley, Mark Spencer tried to recover some ground. We can still fix this, he muttered to Coleman. File a compliance note. Say the system glitched. But the tablet in his hand blinked again. Warning. Audit loop locked. Data immutable. FAA mirror is live. Their screen recording. Ava's voice echoed through the flight deck speaker. In real time. In Washington, D.C., an FAA spokesperson was now on the phone with press, declining to comment but confirming an active audit event is underway. Stratus Logic posted a simple statement. We do not certify silence, we certify truth. Blue Seal ethics has been triggered. We stand with integrity. Back in the air, Nathaniel remained in his seat as the ripple effect continued to unfold. Passengers began speaking freely now. A woman in 1F turned to Captain Coleman. You owe him an apology. This is outrageous, another man muttered. I almost said nothing, a younger woman whispered, and I feel sick about it. Even the businessman from 1C, the smug one, finally stood up. He walked over and held out his hand awkwardly. Mr. Bishop, I didn't know. I apologize. Nathaniel didn't take the hand. You didn't have to know who I was to treat me with basic respect. That's the whole point. At that exact moment, Ava Kinley received a ping from the FAA Deputy Director. Request. Immediate clarification on Blue Seal charter terms. Scope. Nationwide. Enforcement. Pending. She blinked, then smiled. This wasn't just one flight anymore. Back on board, Daniel J. posted his most explosive update yet. Update. FAA reviewing Blue Seal ethics charter for federal rollout. 5 major airlines on standby. Industry-wide change incoming. Blue Seal. Passenger dignity. This changes everything. Captain Coleman turned to Mark. We're not flying this plane, are we? Mark sat down heavily in the cockpit chair. No, we're grounded. Because of one passenger? Mark looked toward the cabin, where every single passenger was now filming, tweeting, speaking, or sitting in stunned silence. No, he said. Because of what we did to that one passenger. Nathaniel finally stood. His voice was calm, but it carried now. Let me be clear, he said to the cabin. This isn't about revenge. This is repair. You all witnessed it. Not just what they said, but what they assumed and what they tried to erase. He turned to Captain Coleman. You didn't just see a man you didn't recognize. You saw someone who didn't fit your mold, and you moved to remove him. But I'm not the one who's leaving today. Behind him, a soft tone played from the overhead screen. FAA had just posted its public directive. All federally certified airlines must review and sign the Blue Seal Ethics Charter within 72 hours or risk suspension. The first call came in just 7 minutes after the FAA directive went public. What the hell is going on with Blue Seal? It was from the Chief Operating Officer of Tri-Coast Airlines, one of the 5 major carriers now under review. His voice was sharp, tense, layered with the kind of panic that doesn't come from customer service complaints, but from the sudden possibility of federal grounding. At Stratus HQ, Ava Kinley barely looked up from her screen. Blue Seal Charter is now mandatory. You have 72 hours to acknowledge and sign, she said flatly. Non-compliance will result in temporary revocation of technical validation. Temporary? For the first 48 hours, Ava clarified. Then permanent. There was a long silence on the other end. Then a curse. Then a dial tone. She logged the call, added it to the audit log, and moved on. It was only the beginning. Across the country, newsroom phones started ringing off the hook. CNBC, Reuters, ABC, Aviation Weekly. The headlines were fast and furious. CEO profiled mid-flight sparks, federal ethics firestorm, Blue Seal goes nationwide. After onboard discrimination incident, Nathaniel Bishop's silence speaks louder than Systems One reporter from the Washington Post tweeted. The man they tried to remove from his seat now owns the seat at the table. By the time CNN Breaking News aired a segment titled, "When Quiet Power Breaks the System," the video of the flight had already passed 1.8 million views. Back on the grounded jet, the energy had shifted. The man who had once been silently erased from the manifest now owned the cabin without raising his voice. Passengers were standing, not to protest but to support. One woman, white, mid-60s, stood in the aisle and said to the crew, "I've flown for 40 years. I've never seen anything this ugly or this honest." Another, a young black engineer named Tyrell Hammond, approached Nathaniel. "Sir, I work in aerospace. I used to think no one was watching, but you just made the system watch itself." Nathaniel offered a quiet nod. That was enough. Inside the cockpit, Mark Spencer was pacing. "We're screwed, Tracy. The FAA just linked to the flight log. They're mirroring our own crew inputs in real time." Tracy Coleman sat still, jaw clenched. "He planned this," she muttered. "He baited us." Mark shook his head. "No, he tested us. We failed." And then came the message that sealed it. Blue Seal protocol violation confirmed. Crew suspension advised. Mark slumped into the pilot's seat. "We're not flying this plane today. Hell, we may never fly again." Meanwhile, back at Stratus HQ, the pressure mounted. Requests were pouring in from Airlines. North Continental. "Can we negotiate terms?" Emirasphere. "Do we have to share our crew history?" Sky Nova. "Our legal team wants to review Clause 6.2 on race-based profiling logs." Ava's reply to all three? "Blue Seal isn't optional. It's not just a protocol. It's the new altitude for ethics in DC." Session of the House Subcommittee on Aviation Oversight was convened by 4:30 p.m. They requested Nathaniel Bishop for a closed-door briefing within 48 hours. He hadn't even left the tarmac, and yet the federal government was moving. Daniel J. posted his most viral tweet yet. "You don't need to shout to create change. You just need to build the system that forces others to face what they ignored." Nathaniel Bishop didn't argue. He just uploaded. It hit 2 million views in under an hour. That evening, a veteran flight attendant named Jeanette Reynolds went live on TikTok. She'd been flying for 22 years. White, Midwest accent, straight talker. We've all seen it. We've all heard it. The microaggressions, the assumption games. They don't look first class. Did they really pay for that seat? And yeah, I've said nothing too many times, but not today. Today I saw a man take all that ugliness and burn it down with one button. FAA ain't leading this change. He is. Back in the cabin, as the cleanup team prepped to escort Tracy, Mark, and the senior crew off the aircraft for suspension, no one clapped. That was the most damning silence of all. Even the crew who had once stood behind Tracy had now taken seats, in the back. Emma, the junior attendant, quietly walked up to Nathaniel. "Sir," she said, voice cracking, I knew what was happening wasn't right, but I froze. I'm sorry." Nathaniel looked at her, then said simply, "Then, next time, unfreeze." She nodded, tears in her eyes. As Nathaniel finally stood to deplane, Blue Seal began flashing updates on cabin monitors. Compliance confirmed. Tri-Coast Airlines, Amorosphere, North Continental, remaining, Sky Nova, Aerolink. Ava's voice pinged his earpiece. 3 down, 2 to go. FAA just published the full charter publicly. It's trending globally. You ready for DC? Nathaniel stepped down from the aircraft stairs, phone still off. He looked at the rising sun, nodded once. Let's bring it home. By midnight, 5 of the 6 largest carriers in the U.S. had signed the Blue Seal Ethics Charter. FAA released a statement acknowledging that Stratus Logic Systems would now serve as official ethics oversight partner in future airline certification reviews. The man they tried to remove for not looking the part was now the one rewriting the part. The hearing room was colder than expected, not because of the marble walls or the industrial strength AC. It was colder because everyone inside knew something heavy was about to surface. The kind of truth that didn't just change policy, but exposed how far the rot had spread. Nathaniel Bishop sat at the center table. No attorney by his side, no entourage. Just him in a tailored navy suit with a Blue Seal pin gleaming quietly on his lapel. Behind him, the seal of the United States House Subcommittee on Aviation Oversight loomed large. In front of him, a dozen congressional members reviewed a packet labeled Confidential, Ethics Manipulation and Suppressed Complaints, Charter Carriers 2023-2025. The room buzzed with media presence, advisors, and silent witnesses. But the one seat everyone kept glancing at was empty. Captain Tracy Coleman had not shown up. Congresswoman Evelyn Harris, chair of the subcommittee, leaned forward. Mr. Bishop, for the record, can you confirm that you are the founder of Stratus Logic Systems and the architect behind the Blue Seal Ethics Charter? Yes, ma'am, Nathaniel said calmly. And is it true that you boarded Flight 419 as a standard first-class passenger without disclosing your identity to test the ethics compliance of the crew? It is. And in the course of that flight, you were denied access to your seat, profiled based on appearance, and marked unauthorized in the system without verification? Nathaniel nodded once. That's correct. There was a pause, the kind that hangs between words when the weight is still sinking in. What happened next, Mr. Bishop? Nathaniel let the silence settle before answering. I let the system speak for me. In the back of the room, a woman in a gray blazer gripped her notebook tighter. Her name was Elaine Carter. She wasn't a politician. She was passenger 3D on the flight, the one who had watched, said nothing. And now, she'd been subpoenaed to testify. Her stomach twisted, not because she'd lied, but because she'd stayed silent when silence was the lie. Congresswoman Harris looked down at the next page in the file. According to Blue Seal records, the flight crew on 4119 has a collective total of 18 prior complaints of racial bias, with at least 6 of them suppressed or marked as resolved without action. She raised her eyes to the room. Mr. Bishop, how were those complaints hidden? Nathaniel glanced briefly at his watch, not to check the time, but to collect his answer. A pattern, he said, of manipulation. He gestured toward the monitors lining the chamber walls. One of them flickered to life. A slide showed manual overwrites of crew behavior reports, altered timestamps on complaint submissions, emails flagged as non-priority routed to internal junk filters, passenger accounts marked as unreliable without cause. They didn't need to erase complaints, Nathaniel said. They just needed to bury them deep enough that no one would go looking. At that, Congressman Reed, a former pilot himself, spoke up. You're telling us a system trusted to fly federal officials, engineers, and civilians was quietly deleting ethical violations to protect a few bad crew. I'm saying the system wasn't broken, Nathaniel replied. It was working exactly how it was designed to protect the comfortable and discredit the uncomfortable. A soft murmur moved through the room. At the edge of the chamber, Emma Walsh, the junior flight attendant from Flight 4119, sat stiffly in the witness waiting area. She'd received her subpoena 2 days prior, and she had a choice to make. Protect the crew or tell the truth. She didn't look up when her name was called, but she stood, and walked. Under oath, Emma's voice shook. "I didn't log the override," she said. "But I saw it happen. Mark, First Officer Spencer, told the technician to flag Mr. Bishop as unauthorized before he was even scanned. Captain Coleman never checked his ID. She just assumed." Congresswoman Harris frowned. "And did you report what you witnessed?" Emma hesitated. "No, I was afraid. I was new, and I didn't want to be next." From the gallery, Elaine Carter closed her eyes. She remembered that moment on the plane, how she'd watched Emma freeze, how she'd told her own husband, "He hasn't done anything," then looked away as the crew doubled down. Now, she couldn't look away anymore. Elaine took the stand. Her voice was steady, even if her chest wasn't. "I was seated across the aisle," she began. "I watched the crew strip that man's dignity like it was standard operating procedure. I didn't speak. I should have. Because silence lets people like Tracy Coleman stay in power." There were no cheers, just the stillness that comes when someone tells the truth without flinching. As she stepped down, Nathaniel offered a slight nod, not of praise, but of recognition. Later in the hearing, an FAA ethics investigator took the microphone. He confirmed that Blue Seal's full system had now been approved for rollout across all federally certified flights. Within 60 days, all airlines operating under FAA charter must integrate Blue Seal Live monitoring and ethics transparency. Failure to do so will result in progressive suspension of operations. The final moment of the session came when Chairwoman Harris addressed Nathaniel directly. "Mr. Bishop, one last question." He looked up. "Why didn't you stop the flight before it started? You had the power. You could have identified yourself, ended it quickly." Nathaniel took a long breath, then said, "Because this wasn't just about me. It was about who they were when they thought no one was watching. Now the world is." Outside the hearing chamber, reporters lined up 5 deep. Cameras rolling, headlines updating in real time. Blue Seal confirmed as federal standard. Suppressed complaints finally see daylight. Nathaniel Bishop called the quiet architect of reform. At Stratus HQ, Ava Kinley stood by the screen, watching the stream wrap up. "He didn't testify to punish anyone," she whispered. "He testified to reset the altitude of this entire industry." And back in Arlington, alone in his office, Nathaniel removed his lapel pin and placed it carefully beside a photo of his younger self in uniform, standing on an airfield in Ramstein, 1985. He looked older now, wiser. But one thing hadn't changed. He still flew by principle. 3 days after the hearing, Nathaniel stood alone in his office. Rain tapped against the tall windows of Stratus HQ, but his focus was locked on the screen in front of him. His inbox had over 900 unread messages, supporters, whistleblowers, media, even international regulators asking for Blue Seal integration. But that wasn't what made him pause. It was the subject line of an email flagged by Ava herself. RE 2018 incident, Flight 7623, Henderson. And the name of the sender chilled him to his core. Isaiah Henderson. 6 years ago, Flight 7623 never made the headlines. It was a routine route from Denver to Boston. No crash, no fatality, but something far more sinister. A black military veteran, Colonel Isaiah Henderson, was dragged out of his seat mid-air after being falsely accused of aggressive behavior. He wasn't loud. He wasn't unruly. He was reading a briefing document and didn't hear the attendant call for trash pickup. When he didn't respond, they flagged him as non-compliant. Within minutes, they had handcuffed him to the back galley near the lavatory for the rest of the flight. No charges were filed, no footage was released, and no apology was ever given. Until now. Nathaniel clicked open the file. What he saw wasn't just a letter. It was a full classified report. Internal airline footage, crew statements, passenger testimonies, all suppressed under executive override. "They buried me," Isaiah had written, "but not deep enough." Nathaniel called Ava in. She entered quickly, still holding a steaming cup of jasmine tea. "We have something," he said quietly. She scanned the documents. Wait, this is the same airline that just signed Blue Seal. Nathaniel nodded. They knew about this, and they pretended it never happened. Ava's hands clenched. What do you want to do? I want this in the light. Every last frame. 2 hours later, the footage from Flight 7623 went live on Blue Seal's official transparency portal. Within minutes, Isaiah Henderson was trending on every major platform. The video was devastating. It showed a calm, composed black man, dressed in military uniform, being humiliated, restrained, and ignored. Passengers tried to speak up. They were silenced. The captain never even looked him in the eye. One voice, however, was loud, from 2018 and now again in 2025. It was Samantha Cho, a Korean-American flight attendant who had resigned after that flight in protest. She posted her first public video since. I told HR, I told the union, I told everyone. They said, this isn't a pattern, it's an isolated incident. They lied. Now you see what I saw, and they're still flying. The Department of Justice called within 6 hours. Not to warn, not to threaten, but to ask for access. A federal ethics inquiry was launched, retroactive to 2016. The Blue Seal Protocol would now become the standard reference point for case reopenings and historical ethics audits. Back at Stratus HQ, Nathaniel stared at the wall-sized map showing every airline currently under Blue Seal monitoring. 5 of them were flashing yellow. Ava stood beside him. The one's blinking. They're hiding something. You can feel it. Nathaniel nodded. Then let's make hiding impossible. That night, Nathaniel went home and pulled out a long-forgotten envelope from the back of his personal safe. It was from his father, Air Force Colonel Gregory Bishop, written in 1989, months before he died of cancer. The letter was short, but it burned. One day, son, they'll try to take your seat. Don't fight for the chair, fight for the table. Nathaniel sat in the dark for a long while, not broken, just remembering. The next morning, Ava burst into his office. It's Isaiah, she said breathlessly. What about him? He's coming to DC and he wants to testify. Nathaniel blinked. They silenced him for 6 years. Now they'll have to hear every word. Within 24 hours, the FAA scheduled an emergency ethics tribunal, not just to address Flight 7623, but to audit every case involving executive overrides since 2015. And leading the panel, Chairwoman Harris. Meanwhile, passengers who had been on Flight 7623 started stepping forward. A young lawyer who quit aviation law after that flight. A school teacher who wrote a complaint and was never contacted. A retired white pilot who said he was ashamed to wear the same wings. Each voice added fuel. Not to anger, but to the fire of reckoning. And yet, even in the middle of that storm, Nathaniel remained calm. He held a single press conference, just once, and all he said was this: "This isn't justice. This is gravity. What you push down will always rise." The tribunal chamber was packed, not just with government officials and airline executives, but with people who had never been allowed inside the rooms where systems were built to erase them. Journalists lined the walls. Veterans sat front row. And at the center table, Nathaniel Bishop waited quietly, again without lawyers, again without apology. But this time, he wasn't alone. On his right sat Colonel Isaiah Henderson, upright in full dress uniform. And to his left, Samantha Cho, the whistleblower flight attendant who had once walked away in silence, now here to speak on record. Chairwoman Evelyn Harris opened the hearing. This tribunal is convened under emergency authorization to determine the scope of ethical violations and data suppression by commercial airline carriers operating under FAA charter authority. Let the truth rise, and let no one block its path. Just outside the chamber, 2 men sat nervously in a black sedan parked across the street. They weren't press. They weren't officials. They were data contractors hired by Skynova's legal team, with one mission: Purge all records flagged under Blue Seal. Wipe the server by midnight. One of them typed quickly into a secure tablet. The other watched the hearing stream nervously, until one name flashed on the screen that made both freeze. Login detected. Ava Kinley. Live trace enabled. Inside Stratus HQ's security room, Ava leaned forward over a glowing interface. "You really thought I wouldn't build a mirror channel?" she whispered. "Every override you try to trigger, I already built a countermeasure." She hit enter, and halfway across DC, the contractor's screens went dark. Not frozen, seized by federal warrant. Seconds later, both men were arrested on live footage shown via split screen in the tribunal room. Chairwoman Harris paused mid-sentence, her aide whispering the news in her ear. She looked toward Nathaniel. "Did you know this would happen?" He didn't smile. He just said, "I gave them a chance to fly straight. They chose the nosedive." The room shifted. Suddenly, the hearing wasn't just about past violations. It was about present obstruction. And Nathaniel had just exposed a new layer of corruption. Executives willing to commit felony acts to hide racial profiling data from public view. Then came the unlikeliest twist of all. The room quieted as a tall man entered from the side door. He wasn't on the list of expected speakers, but everyone knew who he was. David Remington, Chief Compliance Officer of Skynova. He took the witness seat, face pale but focused. "I'm here to confess," he began. "In 2022, I personally authorized the reclassification of over 47 Blue Seal incident reports as user error to maintain investor confidence before our IPO filing. Those reports included racial profiling, sexual misconduct, and at least one case of a disabled passenger being denied oxygen support on descent." A gasp swept through the room. "We didn't just look the other way," Remington continued. "We looked directly at the victims and hit delete." Chairwoman Harris leaned in. "Why are you confessing now?" Remington looked at Nathaniel. "Because the man I tried to bury just brought daylight to the whole graveyard, and I have a daughter now, and I don't want her to grow up thinking silence is safe." Nathaniel didn't nod, didn't soften. But Ava noticed the way his hand curled tighter around the Blue Seal pen in front of him. There was justice in that silence. When the hearing adjourned, the fallout was immediate. The Department of Justice launched a full-scale obstruction investigation. Skynova's stock dropped 18% in 6 hours. Blue Seal was upgraded from experimental charter to mandatory ethical standard for all federal aviation contracts starting next quarter. But behind the scenes, something more unexpected happened. That night, Nathaniel received a private invitation, not from a CEO, not from the FAA, but from Senator Claudia Reyes, rumored to be a front-runner for the next vice president nominee. They met in a secured conference room. No press allowed. Reyes leaned forward. "What you've done here is unprecedented," she said. "You've held an entire industry accountable. I need someone like that on the National Aviation Reform Council. I want you to lead it." Nathaniel didn't speak. Reyes added, "You won't just influence airline policy, you'll help shape how America defines fairness in the skies." Ava waited for him outside after the meeting. "So, are you going to accept?" Nathaniel looked out at the city skyline, the same skyline where he'd once been told, they don't need another black man in aviation leadership. Now they needed him to write the rules. "I'll give them an answer tomorrow," he said, but Ava could already read it in his eyes. That night, back at home, Nathaniel received a text. It was from Isaiah Henderson, just 5 words. They finally heard the truth. Nathaniel stared at the screen a moment, then replied, "And they'll never unhear it." They never clapped. No headlines, no red carpets, no ticker tape parades. When a black man forces 5 major airlines to publicly admit they ignored racial profiling, you don't get applause. You get a target on your back. It started quietly. 2 speaking engagements Nathaniel had confirmed suddenly got rescheduled. Then 3 industry roundtables dropped his name from the panel list. An email thread leaked showing aviation lobbyists calling him a reputational risk to commercial partnerships. But the real punch came on a Tuesday morning. Ava was the first to see it. "Nate," she said, standing frozen outside his glass-walled office. "You need to read this." She handed him a printed email thread marked, "FRIE, Ethics Compliance Interference, Internal Contingency Strategy. From Keller Group Aviation PAC. To Select Congressional Staff. Confidential." The memo outlined a quiet plan to defund the Blue Seal Charter through strategic legal delays and behind-the-scenes lobbying. One sentence stood out. "If Bishop continues to obstruct standard industry practice, we'll force his name to be synonymous with delays, not solutions." Nathaniel didn't flinch. He'd seen this move before. "When they can't discredit the system," he muttered, "they try to smear the man who built it." That afternoon, he called a closed-door meeting with Ava and his core legal team. He spoke plainly. "They're going to make this political," he said. "They're going to spin Blue Seal as overreach. Say it's anti-business, anti-freedom, anti-choice." "So, what's our move?" Ava asked. "We don't play defense," Nathaniel said. "We go deeper." The team pulled out case files. One by one, they cross-referenced every airline still dragging their feet on compliance. Within 36 hours, Ava found something strange. "This can't be real," she whispered, staring at a series of contracts. "What is it?" Nathaniel asked. 3 of the top 5 non-compliant carriers are being insured under an umbrella coverage deal that predates the Blue Seal Protocol. She zoomed in on the fine print. "And guess who owns the reinsurer?" She tapped the screen. "Keller Holdings." Nathaniel exhaled slowly. "So they're not just lobbying against us. They're betting against accountability, while ensuring the very airlines that fail ethics audits." "They don't want Blue Seal shut down," Ava said grimly. "They want it crippled so it looks weak, so they can say it failed." Nathaniel stood. "Then it's time we show them what failure really looks like." That night, under a different name, Ava uploaded an internal report to an anonymous tip line connected to the Senate's Ethics Oversight portal. The report laid bare the direct financial entanglements between aviation lobbying firms and the insurance networks covering high-violation airlines. She didn't sign it. She didn't need to. It was too precise not to be real. But the next day, Ava received an encrypted message through her secure line. "We know what you did. Stay in your lane, or you'll never work again." She showed it to Nathaniel. He read it once, then twice. And without speaking, he turned off his phone, opened a drawer, and pulled out an old device. One he hadn't used in over a decade. A military-grade communicator, back from his classified systems engineering days. "We're switching to blackout mode," he said. "No email, no shared drives, no assumptions." "Who do you think leaked our activity?" Ava asked quietly. Nathaniel looked her straight in the eye. "I don't think. I know." The next morning, they summoned the full leadership of Stratus for a private emergency. Nathaniel's eyes landed on Kyle Mercer, his recently promoted Internal Affairs Director. Smart, charismatic, Ivy League. And, Ava had just discovered, deeply connected to Keller Group through a silent board appointment in a tech firm under Keller's umbrella. "Kyle," Nathaniel said coolly, "how long have you been funneling internal strategy to Keller?" Kyle blinked. "Excuse me?" Nathaniel stepped forward, calm but unflinching. "We found the back door you built. You didn't just leak our compliance models, you copied passenger-level metadata from 3 flagged airlines and sold the trend forecasting to Keller's investment branch." Kyle swallowed hard. I thought it was just theoretical analysis. No names, no actions, just risk matrices." Ava cut in. "You sold our fire extinguisher to the arsonist, Kyle." The room went silent. Nathaniel gave him a choice. "Resign quietly and surrender access, or I expose everything you touched and drag your career across every ethics hearing in Washington." Kyle resigned within the hour, but the breach left its mark. Nathaniel stood in front of the panoramic window of his office that night. The skyline looked the same, but he knew better now. Power doesn't attack you with noise. It attacks you with silence, with favors pulled, deals blocked, access denied. They're afraid, Ava said behind him. You're rewriting rules they were never meant to follow. Then we write louder, Nathaniel said. And just as they were locking up for the night, another message arrived. Not encrypted, not anonymous. This time, from Senator Claudia Reyes. The White House wants to talk. They've seen what's happening, and they're ready to make Blue Seal federal law. Nathaniel didn't react. He looked at Ava. You still in this with me? You have to ask, she said. He walked to the desk, sat down, and drafted a new memo. It was short, clear, and targeted. Beginning next week, all Blue Seal compliant carriers will be prioritized for federal travel contracts, security partnerships, and global aviation cooperation frameworks. All others will be listed as limited integrity risk. He hit send. And just like that, the war for the skies wasn't just political anymore. It was economic. It was personal. It was system-wide. It happened at 8:14 a.m. on a rainy Thursday. The financial wires lit up with a single headline. Airlines Air files for bankruptcy. Ethics compliance failure, cited by federal agencies. By noon, 17 of their domestic routes were grounded. By sundown, 2 international code-share partners suspended all cooperation. And just like that, Blue Seal had claimed its first giant. Nathaniel didn't gloat. He didn't send a press release or hold a briefing. Instead, he sat in his office in silence, watching the collapse unfold in real time. That wasn't our goal, Ava said, entering with 2 coffees, but it was always going to happen. He nodded slowly. They didn't fall because of us. They fell because of who they refused to become. Within hours, passengers began sharing their experiences on Airlines flights, ones that never made it into official reports. A black doctor forced to move because an attendant felt uncomfortable. An elderly veteran left unattended during turbulence because his row was downgraded mid-flight. A disabled child denied pre-boarding because his wheelchair didn't qualify as priority mobility. It was a flood, and no amount of spin from Airlines' PR team could hold back the tide. By 3 p.m., a man named Richard Alvarez walked into the Federal Ethics Oversight Office unannounced. He was a former Airlines operations executive, clean record, no scandal, until now. His voice trembled as he spoke to the agents. I've held this in for 10 years, he said, but after today, I can't anymore. There's something we buried in 2015, something Blue Seal doesn't know yet. That night, Nathaniel received a confidential call from Chairwoman Harris. You need to see this, she said. She shared the classified deposition. Alvarez testified that Airlines Air had knowingly destroyed over 1,200 incident records between 2014 and 2019, many involving racial discrimination, sexual harassment, and even multiple cases of undocumented deportation during flights without due process. They had a code name, Alvarez had said. Project Drift, as in, make it disappear. Nathaniel stood, stunned. That's criminal obstruction, Ava whispered, reading over his shoulder. It's more than that, Nathaniel muttered. It's institutional erasure. The fallout was seismic. Within 24 hours, the DOJ launched a formal criminal probe into Airlines' executive board. 2 Airlines board members were arrested at JFK. The Whistleblower Protection Act was expanded by emergency vote to cover aviation-specific ethics violations. And then came something no one expected. At 8:46 p.m., Nathaniel's personal line rang. Only 2 people had the number. Neither one was calling. The voice on the line was older, measured, calm. Mr. Bishop, it said. My name is Dr. Anita Voss. I head the ethics division for the World Public Health Alliance. Nathaniel paused. What can I do for you, Dr. Voss? I've been watching the Blue Seal protocol, and frankly, it's the most scalable ethics framework we've seen in 20 years. I'm calling because we want to explore expanding your model, not just in aviation, but into public healthcare systems. Nathaniel blinked. You're asking me to reform hospitals now? Dr. Voss chuckled. I'm asking you to bring accountability where people can't escape. Planes force closeness. Hospitals force vulnerability. We need an index that protects patients the way you've protected passengers. That night, Ava found Nathaniel in the executive lounge, alone. She sat beside him without speaking for a moment. "So, healthcare now?" she said finally. "That's the offer," Nathaniel replied. "Are we ready for that?" "No, but maybe that's the point." Meanwhile, outside the walls of Stratus, chaos brewed. 4 major airlines launched a coalition for transportation freedom, denouncing Blue Seal as a government overreach and a biased data trap. They lobbied hard. TV ads, think tanks, even celebrity endorsements. But the public, they weren't buying it. Because Blue Seal wasn't just a system anymore, it was a standard of dignity. Online, a video went viral. It showed an elderly black woman stepping onto a plane. For the first time in her life, a flight attendant looked her in the eye and said, "Ma'am, thank you for being here. You matter. And this flight follows Blue Seal." The woman teared up. "I've waited 74 years to hear that," she said softly. Nathaniel watched the clip with Ava. Neither said a word. But when it ended, he looked at her and asked, "Do you think they're ready for us to move beyond just first class?" Ava smiled. "Nate, I think the whole damn sky is finally listening." Nathaniel hadn't seen him in 23 years. Not since he'd walked out of that Pentagon briefing room and slammed the door on a classified military AI ethics project that had nearly erased the lives of 3 villages in Yemen. But there he was, standing at the back of the Blue Seal Civic Oversight Summit in Chicago. Same posture, same voice. Only this time, he wasn't giving orders. He was watching Nathaniel on stage, where the applause was real. Nathaniel felt the chill immediately. He finished his speech, a clear, confident unveiling of the next stage of the Blue Seal Charter, a civilian-led ethics oversight board, with power to audit and suspend federal contracts of any airline or transportation company failing human dignity metrics. The room erupted in applause, but his eyes never left the man at the back. Later that night, at the hotel lounge, he appeared beside Nathaniel without warning. "Still know how to give a room goosebumps," he said. Nathaniel didn't flinch. "Still wearing secrets like suits, Alan?" Alan Monroe, former deputy director of the Office of Military Integration. And the man who once told Nathaniel, "They'll never give power to a black engineer who builds systems instead of missiles." Now, Alan leaned closer. "I'm here because your little Blue Seal thing, it's about to crash into something bigger than you. And I'm offering you a seat before that happens." Nathaniel sipped his drink. "You don't make offers. You make threats sound polite." Alan smirked. "Fine, here's the unvarnished version. If you don't quietly walk back this civilian oversight plan, we'll tank it. You'll be discredited by morning. Congress will claim bias. Airlines will sue. And your funding pipeline will be rerouted into something we control. And by the way," he added, "the Department of Defense is watching. They don't like civilian boards sniffing around federal contracts." Nathaniel leaned forward. "You think I forgot how you operate? You think because you put on a suit and show up civil, you're not the same man who scrubbed names from drone logs and called it non-human asset loss? You couldn't break me at 29, Alan. You won't break me at 52. Alan chuckled. "Then let's see how well you hold up when the system hits back. Harder than ever." He stood, dropped a card on the table, and walked away. Nathaniel didn't touch it. The next morning, things got strange fast. An op-ed dropped in a major paper calling Blue Seal's civilian board a woke surveillance tool designed to punish corporations. By noon, a lawsuit was filed by a right-wing coalition claiming the Blue Seal Charter violated free market liberties. And at 3:17 p.m., Ava burst into his office holding a red envelope. "This was hand-delivered," she said. "No name, just this." Inside was a glossy photo. Nathaniel, 10 years ago, at a private funeral, holding hands with a woman no one knew. On the back, a handwritten note. "Your past is still fair game." Ava stared at it. They're not just coming after Blue Seal. They're coming after you. Nathaniel walked out to the terrace, his mind racing. He wasn't just being threatened. They were trying to fracture him from the inside out, reopen grief, weaponize memory, shatter trust. But something strange happened. Instead of breaking, he felt clear. "They've run out of arguments," he said aloud. "So they're using shadows." That night, he made a call to someone he hadn't spoken to in 15 years, Dr. Lenora Moss, the woman in the photo. She picked up after the first ring. "Took you long enough," she said, her voice dry but warm. "They dragged you into this," he said quietly. "No, Nate. You walked into it the second you said dignity belongs in systems. You think Alan didn't have a drawer full of files waiting for the day you got big? But you know what he doesn't have? The power of people who've seen how systems treat them and who now believe they can change it." Nathaniel exhaled. "I'm about to go through hell." "So go through it," Lenora replied. "But don't come out the other side quiet." The next morning, Nathaniel entered the press conference alone. No prepared statement, no teleprompter, just truth. "They've called Blue Seal a weapon," he said. "But I say this, it's only a weapon if you're afraid of accountability. They say a civilian board is dangerous. I say it's only dangerous if your power depends on silence. And if trying to make systems fairer means they dig into my past, then let them dig. Because everything I've lived through made me the man who built this system, and I'm not done building." The room stood in stunned silence. Then someone in the back, an older woman with salt and pepper hair, stood and began to clap. Soon, the entire room joined, not for show, but for courage. And for the first time in weeks, Nathaniel smiled. Not for the cameras, for himself. What would you have done if someone tried to use your past to silence your mission? Tell us where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to stand your ground when it wasn't easy. This is Telltales, where quiet power always speaks loudest. The headlines came fast. Whistleblower retracts testimony. Says Blue Seal data was misrepresented. Ava Kinley under review for conflict of interest. Anonymous source claims Nathaniel Bishop manipulated metrics for public support. It was a full-on offensive, and it worked for a moment. Within 48 hours, 3 senators called for a freeze on Blue Seal's expansion. Corporate backers started to pull ad revenue from supporting media. And the morning news cycle was led with a carefully chosen phrase: "Is Blue Seal more about revenge than reform?" Nathaniel sat in silence, watching the broadcast. He didn't blink, but Ava could tell something was different in his eyes. "You knew they'd come?" she said softly. He nodded. "I just didn't think one of our own would hand them the sword." It came from Darren West, Blue Seal's former chief systems architect, and Nathaniel's most trusted technical ally. He had testified in favor of Blue Seal before the ethics committee, had dined in Nathaniel's home, had once said, "If you fall, I fall with you." Now, Darren was on a live interview saying the opposite. "I respect Nathaniel," Darren said to the camera, "but the system's gotten too political. It's not about fairness anymore, it's about control. And I won't be part of a framework that punishes based on optics." Ava slammed her laptop shut. "They got to him." Nathaniel didn't respond right away. He just looked out the window at the dusk skyline. Maybe they offered him something. Or maybe he always needed the room to love him. Either way, I can't chase that betrayal. I've got bigger skies to protect. The next blow came from the Office of Contracting Integrity. An internal audit claimed Blue Seal's ethics scoring model lacked sufficient external validation and suspended all future federal integration until further notice. It was a tactical chokehold. No new airlines could join the system. Existing partners were left in limbo. And in private circles, CEOs started whispering what they'd never dared before. What if we just waited for Blue Seal to collapse? But that night, something shifted. An encrypted message came through Ava's secure comms server. Subject line: ICAO request. Urgent response needed. She read it 3 times before knocking on Nathaniel's door. "You're gonna want to see this." Inside the message was an official invitation. The International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, a United Nations specialized agency, wanted Nathaniel to present Blue Seal at the Global Aviation Governance Forum in Geneva. "Your framework represents the most credible ethics standard proposed since 1982, the message read. "We believe Blue Seal could be the foundation for a new international certification model. We ask that you present as a candidate for global adoption." Nathaniel read the message twice, then again. Ava watched him carefully. "This is it, isn't it?" she asked. "The moment." He nodded slowly. "If we go to Geneva, we don't just reform airlines. We shift how the world measures dignity at 35,000 feet. 3 days later, Nathaniel landed in Switzerland, and despite the pressure, despite the firestorm back home, he walked into the Geneva Assembly Hall unshaken. The room was a tapestry of nations, 193 delegates, some skeptical, some silent, but all watching. He stepped to the podium. "I'm not here to sell software," he began. "I'm here because I was once told people like you don't belong in first class, not even in the cockpit of systems. Well, I didn't listen, and neither should you. Blue Seal is not a punishment model. It is a mirror. It shows us who we are at our worst, so we can choose to be better. It doesn't care about your rank, your accent, your seat number. It only cares if you treated someone like they were human." Then he paused and added, "And if that's controversial, maybe the controversy is the mirror, not the method." The room was still. Then, slowly, applause. Not thunderous, but sincere. By day's end, 42 countries had signed a resolution in support of further Blue Seal review. Within a week, 15 international carriers requested pilot integration, and Nathaniel was asked to join the Global Aviation Reform Board as a civilian advisor, the first American and the first black civilian ever offered the seat. Back in the US, the narrative began to crack. The whistleblower who had recanted came forward again, this time under oath, and admitted they'd been pressured by outside legal threats from a private firm with ties to Airlines' dissolved board. The lawsuit quietly dropped. Senators who had attacked Blue Seal, now facing donor exposure inquiries. And Darren West? He sent a letter to the press, a retraction, a confession. "I was manipulated, and I let fear write my words." In D.C., Chairwoman Harris called Nathaniel personally. "You walked through the fire and brought something back," she said. "Not revenge, not headlines, a new flight path." Later that night, Ava found Nathaniel in the hangar overlooking the Potomac. He stood beside the very plane he'd been denied entry to nearly a year ago. "You think they'll ever stop trying to shut it down?" she asked. Nathaniel smiled softly. "I don't care. Because they can't shut down what's already flying free." It didn't start with a press release, or a televised apology, or some flashy headline declaring victory. It started quietly, with a notice. A 4-line bulletin from the Federal Aviation Administration. "Effective immediately, Blue Seal Ethics Charter shall be recognized as a primary framework for aviation conduct certification. All U.S.-based airlines seeking federal approval must implement the Passenger Fairness Index within 12 months. Non-compliant carriers will face license review and operational audit. This decision is non-negotiable." When Ava read it aloud in the office, no one said anything. Not for a full 30 seconds. Then one of the analysts, Maya from the ethics scoring team, just let out a whisper. They blinked. Nathaniel didn't smile. He just nodded once. No more hiding behind policy loopholes. If they want to fly, they fly fair. That same afternoon, a ripple moved through the aviation world. ICAO sent an internal circular to 193 nations. recommending that the Passenger Fairness Index be adopted as a baseline standard for all international carriers seeking safety and ethics certification. By week's end, 76 countries signed the Preliminary Compliance Pact. Then came Skynova's boardroom leak. An internal call recorded between CEO Patrick Langston and his legal counsel surfaced. "This Blue Seal compliance thing will bankrupt us if we don't clean house." And that video? From last year, the one where Langston told the flight crew to remove that black exec from first class. Yeah, it's circulating again. The next day, Langston resigned. Not for personal reasons, but for irreconcilable violations of ethical leadership. His face was on every screen, and for the first time, headlines didn't call it a scandal. They called it a reckoning. At the Blue Seal HQ in DC, the mood was different. It wasn't triumphant. It was steady, grounded. Ava brought in the updated world map. Every country that had signed, every airline in compliance, and one small plaque she printed, from Seat 3C to Global Standard. Nathaniel looked at it, but said nothing. Instead, he looked out the window. The world had shifted, but the question remained. Now what? A week later, he stood in front of the full Blue Seal board. The room was filled with leaders, developers, former victims turned policy advisors, and representatives from 11 different countries. He cleared his throat. "We built a system they couldn't ignore, and we did it without rage, without revenge, without spectacle. But it was never about me. It was about the next passenger who doesn't get dragged from a seat because they don't look like they belong. So, I have a proposal." I step back. Gasps. Even Ava's pen slipped out of her hand. "Wait, you're leaving?" she asked. Nathaniel smiled. "Not leaving, shifting. I'll move into a global advisory role. Blue Seal should be led by the people it protects, not just the man who designed the rules. It needs to outlive me, not revolve around me." There was silence, then applause. And not polite applause. Real, heavy, emotional applause. The kind that said, "We don't want to let go, but we respect that you know when it's time." That evening, Nathaniel sat alone on the same plane where it all began. Seat 3C. It had been restored to its original place, after the airline joined Blue Seal and overhauled its entire crew culture. The flight was empty. It wasn't taking off. It was a private walkthrough. The new CEO of the airline had offered it, as a symbolic moment of closure. Nathaniel sat down, ran his hand along the armrest. The flight attendant walked up, young, nervous. "Sir, I just wanted to say, I joined this job because of what I saw happen to you. You showed me that silence isn't professionalism, and I promise I will never stay silent again." Nathaniel didn't answer right away. Then he nodded. Then it was worth it. As he stepped off the plane, Ava was waiting outside. She handed him a simple folder. "Last one," she said. "They want you to review it before you step back." He opened it. Inside, the Global Passenger Fairness Accord. A binding agreement between Blue Seal, ICAO, and the FAA, creating a permanent international charter for ethics-based airline operations. His signature would finalize it. Ava looked at him. "They want to name the protocol after you. Bishop Standard." Nathaniel looked at the folder, then back at her. "No." She blinked, confused. "Why not?" He handed the folder back. "Name it after the seat." Because this was never about who I am. It was about where someone like me was told they couldn't sit. That night, Nathaniel walked out into the city. No press, no cameras, just the quiet hum of a world that now flew a little fairer. Behind him, planes lit up the sky. And for the first time in a long time, he looked up at them not with the weight of what they meant, but with peace. 6 months later, the world had adjusted. Blue Seal wasn't a headline anymore. It was just there, like seat belts, or safety videos, or oxygen masks. A part of flying, a part of how we move. Airline training manuals now included ethics scoring simulations. Flight schools offered courses in passenger psychology, and at gate agents' kiosks, quiet reminders blinked. Every seat holds a story. Treat it accordingly. Nathaniel kept his promise. He stepped back. No board meetings, no interviews, no public statements. Instead, he returned to something simple: building, not systems, not software, furniture. He opened a small workshop in Virginia, a place where he once sanded wood with his grandfather as a boy. No media coverage, no donors, no buzz. Just his name on a wooden sign, by hand. Ava visited on a Friday afternoon. She carried a letter, a real one, not digital. "From Sky Nova's new CEO," she said, handing it over. "Wants to name their new business class program after the index. The real one, not the flash." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "What's it called?" She grinned. "Seat 3C." They sat in silence for a bit. Birds outside, sunlight catching the wood grain. Then Ava spoke again. "You ever miss it?" He didn't answer immediately. "Sometimes," he said finally. "But only the purpose, not the spotlight." "You?" Ava laughed. "I miss scaring cowardly board members with your name." He chuckled. "You still can." She leaned back, thoughtful. "You know, it's strange. The stories become bigger than the moment. People don't even remember the airline that denied you the seat, but they remember why it mattered." Nathaniel nodded. "That's how you know the work is real." 2 weeks later, Nathaniel found himself back at Reagan National Airport. Not for a meeting, just watching. The terminal buzzed. Families, business travelers, students in backpacks. He didn't need to be recognized, and most people didn't. But every now and then, someone would glance at him, like they thought they knew, then walked on. He liked that. Then he saw her, a girl, maybe 16, maybe 17, hair in long braids, sweatshirt from Howard University, a quiet confidence in her posture, luggage stickered with books. She walked to gate B7, the same gate where his story once unraveled, boarded without incident, found her seat, 3C. He watched from the glass. No one questioned her. No one asked, "Are you sure you belong here?" No one said, "That seat's reserved for premium passengers." The flight attendant simply smiled. "Can I get you anything before takeoff, ma'am?" She nodded, opened a book, and settled in. Nathaniel closed his eyes. For a brief moment, he saw his younger self again. Not the executive, not the builder, not the architect. Just a man in a seat, hoping no one would make him prove his worth to sit there. He turned to walk away, but paused, then pulled out a pen from his coat. On the back of a napkin, he scribbled a short note. Walked to the gate agent, a young man with kind eyes, and handed it over. "Would you mind giving this to the young woman in 3C?" The agent blinked, looked at the note. No signature, just one line. "Don't let anyone make you earn what you already deserve." Nathaniel left the airport before the plane took off. He didn't stay for the reactions, didn't check if the girl read the note. Didn't need to, because the point wasn't the applause. It was the silence, the new normal, the absence of resistance. He stepped outside. The late afternoon light washed over the tarmac. Planes ascended, descended, carried lives, stories, quiet victories. And somewhere up in that sky, someone sat in 3C, unafraid, unbothered, unmoved by doubt, because the seat no longer whispered, "Prove yourself." Now it simply said, "Welcome." Have you ever had to sit somewhere you were told you didn't belong? What would you say now to the younger version of you, waiting to be seen? Tell us where you're watching from, and what your seat means to you. This is Telltales, where justice doesn't shout, it sits down and stays.